I'll try to be a good guy.
Thank you.
Hi there. Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. New Tracks is an exciting new digital opportunity to obtain mentoring to help you improve your modeling. You will meet talented modelers and manufacturers from all over the world who share their model building skills and artistic advice. Improve your modeling and increase the confidence in your modeling efforts. Share your building efforts with fellow modelers and have some fun doing it. The shows are live on Zoom and YouTube, so be sure to join in and ask your questions. Now here is New Tracks founder and your host, Jim Kello, NMRA.
Welcome and Happy New Year. I hope everybody had a wonderful Christmas, a great Happy New Year day, got through all the fireworks, and are ready for 2024. I think it's going to be a wonderful year for New Tracks Modeling, and I hope it's a great year for everybody that watches the show or reads the articles. Before we actually start tonight, I'd like to introduce Father Ron Walters for our show's prayer. Father Walters, please.
Almighty God, just as our models imitate the beauty of creation, may we imitate your kindness and generosity to us in our relationship with others. Bless us now and always. Amen.
Thank you so much, Father. We thank you so much for all that you do for our show. We really do appreciate it and certainly appreciate the prayers for the start of the show. Thank you so much. Well, now I want to introduce the sponsor for our show, which is Brennan's Model Railroading, owned by Dennis Brennan. Actually, I think his wife really runs the whole show, but Dennis takes credit for it. But here is a video of Brennan's Model Railroading.
For over 25 years, Brennan's Model Railroading has been offering unique products for the O-scale market. Our flagship product, Brennan's Better Ballast, was an instant hit and continues to be the industry leader. Its prototypical size and natural color blend of real crushed granite make it the choice for discerning modelers. Since then, we've developed a complementary line of natural ground cover materials. Additionally, we offer craftsman kits that anyone can build with complete photographically illustrated instructions that assume you've never done this before. The Sonky Wanky Coffee Company is the latest and the fourth kit to be added to our ongoing and highly popular limited edition Ellison Tribute series. These kits take Ellison's scratch-built iconic structures to a new level with Dennis' spin. The idea being that if Frank were alive today, this is how we would build these models using modern methods and materials. Use the QR code to visit our website.
Dennis, thank you so very much for wanting to be the sponsor of our show. Dennis's sponsorship helps pay the out-of-pocket cost for producing these shows, and that's why his participation and his involvement and frankly his interest in our show is so important. Now I'd like to introduce Bob Davidson, the chairman of the New Tracks Modeling Mentoring Scholarship Committee, for his report for our scholarship. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. For those folks who may not have been here last week, I did give an update on the success that the scholarship program had in 2023. And we also announced the sponsorship of a $2,000 scholarship by the Pacific Coast region of the NMRA. If you did miss that, there's a link to that segment on the homepage at newtracksmodeling.com. So please visit that and take a look. But because of that, and with the start of the new year, I'm very pleased to announce that the committee we have committed to granting 3 $2,000 scholarships for the 2024-25 academic year. And that goes with all of our thanks to the generous donations from our corporate and individual donors. I'd like to relate a quote from Frank Markovich, who is the president of the PCR, which comes from a press release we recently shared with Gordy Robinson, president of the NMRA. And this statement really captures the spirit of what we set out to accomplish when we established the scholarship program. The PCR, being the first NMRA region, is excited to take a leadership role in offering scholarships to young modelers to help them pursue a higher education degree. Young modelers are the future of model railroad hobby and the NMRA. The skills and knowledge young modelers gain while participating in model railroading are all STEAM-based and lead to great educational opportunities. We hope the scholarship will help a young modeler not only get a degree, but also continue to participate in the model railroading hobby. That's what this is all about. Keeping our hobby alive, keeping it vital and vibrant in the coming years. And our hope is that the PCR's trailblazing commitment will inspire other regions and divisions to consider sponsorships in the future. What we need now is for all of us to spread the news. Please tell all your fellow modelers about the scholarship, and more so, please encourage young modelers to apply. The application process is live now on the website at newtracksmodeling.com/scholarship. You can just click on the application, and you can either apply by mail or you can apply directly online. Also, we are eagerly awaiting donations so that we can continue this plan for future years. Our hope is that as we've grown from the first year of granting one $1,000 scholarship to granting 3 $2,000 scholarships, that we'll be able to continue to grow this program in years to come. So thanks again to everyone who contributed, our brass donors, especially the PCR for their sponsorship of a scholarship. It's been a phenomenal year for the program, a great way to start off, and we look forward to a very successful future. Back to you, Jim.
And let me say something else too. If you have any questions, there's the way you can ask the questions. There's an email address on the scholarship page. If you'll just ask your questions, whatever it may be, we would appreciate that. Bob gets the questions, I get the questions, and one of us will be able to answer whatever question you have about the program, about who's doing what, about anything about the program that you have a question about. This is open. None of the people involved in this program are making one single penny out of working on this scholarship program. None of us. 100% of every contribution that anybody makes through Zephy or by check to Bob or to our treasurer, Tom Farrell, 100% of that money goes in the scholarship fund. And the only money that is spent out of that scholarship fund is direct out-of-pocket cost for such things as any annual fee we have to pay either to the state of Florida or to the federal government, either for the 501c3, if there is a fee. I don't know whether there is or not, but I know there's an annual fee to have the nonprofit corporation in Florida. So we pay that out of the contributions. But other than those kind of fees, or the fees that it cost us to have the banners shipped across the country so that we can have a presence at the train shows around the country. And Bob, I forget how many shows we were at this year, but it was over 30 if I remember right. But
yeah, I think the final number was 32 shows. And
so to have our banners, which by the way, Bob and his company, Exhibits and More, developed, had prepared, and donated free of charge to New Tracks Mentoring Scholarship, to get those shipped to the people who presented those and represented New Tracks at these various shows around the country, that cost came out of the scholarship fund. To date, those are the only fees that have come out of the scholarship fund other than the direct payment of the scholarship to the school where our first winner is enrolled. And that's the same plan that the company has, that the scholarship committee has, for every penny that we raise for 2024 scholarship and for future scholarships. So nobody's making money off of this deal. This isn't a way for Jim Kello, Bob Davidson, Phil, Tom Farrell. We're not getting rich off of this. We're not drawing any money from this. We're doing this because we sincerely believe there's a need. We think we have got to find ways of attracting young people to our hobby. If we don't, we think that the hobby could die. And we're concerned about that because of our love for this hobby. And we're willing to invest in this belief and put our own time and energy into this program. What we're asking you to do is consider a financial contribution to what we're trying to accomplish to attract young people to want to become more involved in our hobby, to want to be able to learn how to become a model railroader and a modeler in our hobby, and hopefully one of the leaders of our hobby in the future. We believe that's a worthwhile investment in our hobby and into the young people's future. And we hope you agree with us. And that's why, if you will go to our website, newtracksmodeling.com/scholarship, it'll tell you how to make a contribution. I frankly don't care if it's $5, $10, $2,000. What I want you to do is, as a community, become an investor in the program. I want our hobby to show the young people that we old guys do care, not just about our hobby, but about the future of our hobby and the growth potential that these young people can provide. They are our future. We need to help them get an education where they are prepared to meet the demands and responsibility of the future. And we are committed to do it one way, with our scholarship. So please consider a donation. Now, if you donated, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. But the other side of the coin, I want to see at least 100 people apply for this money this year. I'm going to be disappointed personally if we can't generate at least 100 applications this year. Why? Because I know the demand is out there. Read your newspaper. Hear people talk. Hear the parents talk about the cost of higher education today. If people are involved in our hobby and are committed to being model railroaders at a young age, let's help them pay for their education. Their parents will thank us, but most importantly, they will understand that we are behind them. It's part of our mentoring for the young people in this hobby. So we need them to apply. We need to communicate to them. We're the only organization that's out there hustling this right now. Nobody else is doing it. The associations aren't doing it. The PCR is the first part of the NMRA that has stepped forward and said, we agree, we believe in this, and we're willing to put some of our money behind it and some of our time behind it to get applicants to apply. Well, that's what we're asking to the community. That's what we're asking to every person who watches right now or watches a video of this later. We want some amount of donation as a part of the community, and we want you to recommend at least one modeler, just one of your friends who has a son or daughter. We want each one of you out there to recommend one modeler get a scholarship. If they're having trouble filling it out, all you got to do is let Bob know or let me know, and we'll arrange to have some help. We'll help them fill it out the same way as we'd help them build a model. It's all mentoring to us, and we're committed to this program, but we need your help. If you're not going to help us, we can't be as successful as I know we can be if the community as a whole gets behind this. So please, if you have questions, let us know what they are. If you can contribute $1, fantastic. Give us the $1, we'll put it in the pot, and that will be one help for one of the scholarships that we're able to award. Whatever your financial contribution is, just be a contributor. We'll worry about raising the total money. We're not worried about raising the money. We know we can raise the money. Look what we've done this year or last year. So we know the money is out there. We know the commitment is out there. We've just got to get the community behind the program. And each person that's hearing my voice right now, please, $1, $2, $5, whatever you can reasonably afford, just be a part of the community and contribute to helping the young people continue our great hobby. That's it. That's my pitch. Bob, thank you so much for your help. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, so much for the pitch on scholarship. We'll now want to introduce Martin Breckbiel, who is the editor of Observations, which is the new email that we publication that he produces once a month. He has just sent out the January issue. It is posted on our website, newtracksmodeling.com. I'm talking about it tonight, so you know where to go if you're watching us on YouTube or see the video of this later. But it's all done by Martin Breckbiel. It's his genius that produces our newsletter. So, Mr. Breckbiel, I will turn it over to you, sir.
Oh, gosh, after all that, I'm not sure what else I could say, having been thoroughly embarrassed as well. Actually, what I can say is I'm working on the February issue already, so contributions are needed. I will come chasing after a handful of regular people that have been contributing that I see at the top scroll of my screen. In fact, there's at least 3 of them there. So everybody who I asked for stuff from last month, well, I need you to think forward into February. I know it's a month ahead of into the future that you have to think, but I don't think it's that difficult to do. If you can't think 30 days into the future, you're probably in trouble. So let me know what you got for me for the observations and send it along. I'll follow that up with an email to you all later. Thanks, Jim.
If you have kids or grandkids, did you give them a train for Christmas? Did you give anything to do with model railroading to your grandkids or kids for Christmas? If so, send a picture of it to Martin.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, let's find out what the kid. I used to get Lionel trains for Christmas, and Dad and I used to sit on the floor, on the carpet, and it was already hooked up. So by the time I ran down the stairs and got there, it was ready to run. All I had to do was turn on the transformer. Did you do anything like that for your kids? If so, send a picture to Martin.
Yeah, send it along. We'll fill up a whole page of
Christmas
contributions on it.
Absolutely. Let's make this fun and share our hobby. You know, that's part of what happens. To me, writing for the model press is talking to ourselves. That's why I started writing for the local newspaper, trying to expand the people I was talking to. Because talking to myself isn't going to get young people involved in our hobby. And if all we're doing is talking to ourselves, then ourselves are going to be the people in our hobby. Well, somebody told me recently that the average age of the NMRA member is around 70 years old. Wait, did I say that right? The average age of the average member of the NMRA is 70 years old? Well, where are the young people? How are we going to exist as an organization with a 70-year-old database? Where's the future of our hobby? Okay. We're starting another new program. We have now started, and you're not going to believe this, but I got it started with the help of my daughter-in-law over the Christmas holidays, a group called New Tracks Modeling. It is a Facebook business group, just like there is for the NMRA or any of the associations or any business. And it's called New Tracks Modeling. What's the purpose of it? Let me read. New Tracks Modeling has created a Facebook group so that all modelers who either read the articles that I write in the 2 publications, S-Scale Resource and O-Scale Resource magazines, or in my local newspaper, or watch our Zoom and live stream YouTube shows weekly, or our subsequent videos that we publish on our YouTube channel. All of you can continue to discuss the material that's presented, the presenters that made the presentation, what you read, what you observed, what you wish you had been able to see, what you want to see in the future. Did you like how it happened? Did you like the show? Did you not like the show? Did you like that we did this part of it? Should we do more of that part of it and less of this part of it? Whatever comment you want to make. We want you to be able to continue talking about the show, talking to the presenters, talking about what you want to talk about, modeling and mentoring after the 2-hour show is over each week. One way of doing that is through this group. You can post anything you want. If you want to join the group, all you got to do is come and join it. It's New Tracks Modeling. You got to go to groups on Facebook and then type in, search for New Tracks Modeling. The photo at the top of it shows a couple of models and 2 modelers that exhibited their models on our last My Build segment of the show last week. And that's what we're going to change each month. We're going to have some of the people that exhibit on the My Build, we're going to show their models and show them on the picture that we post on the New Tracks Modeling Facebook group page. After that, you join it. You're able to post immediately. You're able to talk to everybody else. I've set it up as a private group because the people that I want on it are the viewers or the readers of the articles, are the people that are really interested in modeling, that we know, that we see each week, or we know that read the articles because I get emails from them. I can count on getting 5 or so emails later tonight because I normally get that many after every show. So I know that there is still interest in certain subjects, questions about certain things that were done or not done. And now they can be done anytime you want to do them. If you see a video later and you want to make a comment, go to our group and comment. If you liked a presentation, tell us you liked it. If the person doing the presentation didn't cover a certain area well enough, tell them that. Put it in the post. It's not going to hurt anybody's feelings. We talk about this stuff live on every show or anytime we're dealing with it. It's no different. This is just us talking to each other on an extended basis after the shows each week. That's why we created the group. We hope that you will go to Facebook groups and then go to New Tracks Modeling and join, and then start posting. And I'll look for you as soon as the show is over later tonight. If you have any questions, my email is jimkello@newtracksmodeling.com, and I look forward to hearing from you if you've got any questions about this. Now I want to turn this over to Chris Corse to talk about the My Build that's coming up roughly 2 weeks from now. On the 17th of January is the next one. So Chris, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thanks, Jim. Actually, I kind of started at the end here. Sorry. Show the wrong screen. Let me get to the right one here. Where did they go? Here we go. Okay. Now I know where I am. Apologize. Maybe it's not on there. Hang on, we'll get there. Technical difficulties. There we go. All right, there's that. And then there is the share screen, which shows this. All right, the next My Build is featuring you. It's a free-for-all January 18th, 2 weeks from tonight, 3 weeks from tonight, 2 weeks from tonight, sorry. And to participate, email your photos to me, railrunner130@hotmail.com, and we will be sure to include those in the My Build presentation. If you have not participated before, please include a photo of yourself so that way we can show that as your title on your title card. So it's a free-for-all. That being said, we also have the February, my build will be a challenge. It's oddities. Show us your oddities, aliens, UFO dealership, steampunk stuff, jackalope skull on the front of an oddball backwoods ON30 engine, non-prototypical trains, weird things on depressed center flat cars. I know last year at Amherst I saw some stuff that I thought was really cool. There was a Nautilus, Jules Verne's Nautilus was on a flat car. I thought that was pretty cool. And they also had the DeLorean from Back to the Future. But I want to include all that stuff. Whatever you've got, please share it with us. And that will be for the February 21st show. And going back, February 18th show, please try to get those photos to me by the 14th. That way it'll give me a little bit of time to consolidate and get everything down to get it gelled together properly. And if you are not, if you would like your photos shown, but you won't be on Zoom for whatever reason, be sure to include some descriptions, scales, that sort of thing. That way we can a little bit more intelligently talk about what you've got going on. So anyway, sorry for the technical difficulties, but I'll turn it back over to you, Jim.
Thank you so much, Chris. And seriously, we want as many participants as we can possibly get in the My Bills. We're doing everything that we can to try to encourage you to participate with us in the My Bills. This is your opportunity to show everybody what you're building, to ask questions about it, and to get answers. This is non-judgmental. We're not trying to judge or anything like that. We just want to see what everybody's working on. No big deal. So we hope that you'll participate. And Chris, thanks so much for doing this for us.
Yep. Oh, and Bob corrected me. It's the 17th, not the 18th.
Right. Okay, now let's start the show after all of this. First, I want to run the sponsor video for Millhouse River Studio. This organization is owned by Al Zamaski, and Al has got some absolutely gorgeous products. He really does, and he's a nice guy. He's busy. He hoped to be here tonight. He may not be here the whole show, but he may come in later. If he does, then Al, if you'll let me know, I'll introduce you, because he's really a nice guy and you'll enjoy meeting him. But his company is Millhouse River Studio. So Pat, if you could run that video, please.
Millhouse River Studio builds model train working accessories that are made to last generations. Millhouse River products are built out of aluminum and have scale brass details that even the most demanding scale modeler will appreciate. Since our industry entry in 2009 with the introduction of our flagship turntable, Millhouse River has continued to add new, innovative products, like our scale transfer table, rotary coal dumper, flood coaling tower and, most recently, a working conveyor that transports coal from the dumper to the loader. All of Millhouse River Studio's stunningly realistic products are currently available in O scale. We are adding new scales on some products, including the upcoming release of an HO scale turntable featuring our aluminum construction and stunning brass details that is big enough to handle a big boy locomotive. When it comes to your layout, don't settle for less, get Millhouse River Studio.
And that company is the sponsor of our segment on O-scale high rail modeling. And the host for that is Dennis Brennan. Dennis, welcome.
And Happy New Year to everybody. And I talked to Al this afternoon, and he said he was fairly busy, but he might tune in. I wanted to get him on live, but he's got a lot of stuff going on right now. So I don't think that he was ready to do that, but we will get him on the show. I can attest that Al is an incredible modeler. His turntable and transfer table and his accessories are bulletproof. You won't find anything else better on the market. I've known him since before he started the turntable back in 2009. And in fact, we used to share a booth together at York TCA show. Anyway, you can't go wrong with any of his products. So just give him a shout. He's a heck of a nice guy, and he'll be glad to help you out. Just tell him I sent you. All right. Enough about Al. How about me? Okay. So I'm a high railer. Briefly, that means I am a scale model railroader, except that I use 3-rail track, and I'm using oversized couplers, and maybe the flanges are a bit too big. Other than that, I would put my modeling up against any 2-rail modeling. It's the same thing. Modeling is modeling. That's what Jim tells me all the time. So I think that makes perfect sense. And in regard to that, get your kids interested in it. If you have a kid or you have a grandson, get them interested if you're a train guy, and work on a project, a building kit maybe. And let me give you a clue. My kits are available and the instructions are bulletproof. They assume you've never done this before. I lay it all out. I tell you what tools to use. I tell you how to do it. I tell you the sequence. And if you can read, you could build one of my kits. I guarantee it. All right. So tonight, we're going to talk about Plasticville. I know. Plasticville has been on toy train layouts forever. Over 70 years, 5 years, Bachman has been producing Plasticville kits, and you see them on toy train layouts. But let me tell you something. Some of those buildings that they make are pretty credible models. And we're going to start with the Plasticville Diner. And it's a kit bash that I did. And so let me share the screen here. Right here. All right. Now, are you seeing this picture? Or are you seeing something else?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right. This is Dot's Diner. On the left is the Plasticville kit. That's unadulterated, untouched, just snapped together. On the right is my version of it, which is a kit bash version. And I'll get into more of the details on it later, but you can see there's a big difference. And if we go down a little bit further, how did I come up with this kit bash? Well, if you look at the photo on the bottom left there, Fodero Dining Car Company Diner. That is a diner. I mean, well, let me back up a bit. I've often wondered, where did Bachman get their designs? They didn't just come out with kits. They had to get a design from somewhere, either somebody's imagination, or more likely, somebody saw something, one of their artists, designers, and based it on a real life model. Well, there is a similarity right here. I found this model, this building, in a book called The American Diner by Richard J. Gutman and Elliot Kaufman. And although my model is not an exact duplicate of that, you can plainly see where I got my ideas from. And that's a key. When you want to kit bash something, why don't you look at the real thing instead of just making something up out of your head? Try to find a real example and then just use that as a basis. Don't be a slave to it. You don't have to be a rivet counter. I'm not, but I think if you look at what I did, it's a pretty credible model. All right, so now let me go back and get to the next page here. All right, here's some of the things that I did. Let me make this a little bit smaller here. Let's see. Well, anyway, it's all right for now. I added a clock face. That was real easy. I just took a clock face out of a picture that I got off the internet. Then printed paper blinds I found those. They were from some sort of a kit that I had that was left over in my box, my scrap box. And then I added some steps. You can see the steps that I added. I added a foundation to raise it up so I could add the steps. And then I used 18 gauge wire for these little handrails here. I added a little strip along the roof. And if you noticed from the other picture, I'll show you, what I did was I widened this. The original model only had the doorway and a window. Well, I added this little bit in here, and you'll see how I did that before. I also then had to make the roof wider. And then I added this little styrene scratch built vent here. And that's about all I did. And I'll show you how I made the doors. The doors are all mine. This is a cute little trick here. This styrene is a strip. And I was wondering, how was I going to bend that strip around the corner without breaking it? And the easy way to do that is I started using liquid plastic cement as I went along. And I started from one end. I started from one end and I left it longer than it needed to be. So started here. And I just kept adding glue, and then I just kept adding a little bit of glue. Now, glue softens the plastic, so it makes it very easy to bend. And so I just bent it right around here. It just takes a little patience, but that's how I did that. And it worked out pretty well. Now, of course, I had already pre-painted it. Then we'll get to the next picture here. All right, here's exactly how I kit bashed it. Now, kit bashing, you're going to have seams. And just like it's like real plastic surgery, this is plastic surgery. And the goal is to hide the seams. You're not going to get rid of them, but you're going to hide the scar, basically. So what's the best way to do that? Well, if you see where I made, like where I lengthened this piece and put the doorway in, I put the seams right here. I cut this piece right here. I cut this right here, and I joined them up. Now, all I had to do was a little bit of plastic here and there, and you don't even see a seam there. Once it's painted, that's gone. So I hid the seams in the doorway. And on this one, this is where it normally joins together. Again, the seam is a vertical. It's along here, and I just sanded it down and painted it, and then a little more sanding, and you don't see the seam. And then to do the windows and the doors, the biggest problem with the plastic fill kits, they don't have any glazing in them. And the diner didn't have any glazing. But the diner, the diner did have some plastic glazing. I'm sorry, it did have some, but it wasn't going to be useful. And there were little nubs here that held in the windows. So all I did was I cut those off, and I framed the window with evergreen 0.080 evergreen styrene and the door. And then I just put a solid piece of plastic on there. That's all there was to it. I just put a solid piece of plastic on the back of it, and I built the doorway on top of the plastic. So that's about all I did with this kit. And the other thing that I did is there is this plastic Diner here that you see. I just filled that in with squadron green putty. I filled it in, and you can still see I sanded it down. I made it even. I made it even with, with the top of the, the scribed in lines there. And and then I painted it. Well, actually, I didn't paint it. What I did is I put in, I photoshopped Dot's Diner, and that was photoshopped, and I did it. It's kind of a very light yellow on a red background, and then I cut it out and I fit it into place, and that's all there was to this. So I think that's about it for this. Kit, if anybody has any questions, just give me a holler.
Anybody have any questions for Dennis?
Jim, this is Jeff Jordan. I have a comment. I strongly agree that some of the Plasticville structures are really great resources. Two others that I would mention are their Rico Depot is a really faithful model of that depot, and also their coaling tower with some modification also makes a nice model.
Well, in that vein, I'd like to do a little correction. The Rico station was a Lionel offering. Bachman didn't make a Rico station that I'm aware of. Not
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. It's Lionel, kind of the
Yes.
same category, but yeah.
Anyway, that's a great building. It's a very close replica. And in Bachman, I should say that the other one that I think is really good is their switch tower. That's a pretty credible model. It just needs a little modification, and you can make a great model out of that. So next month, that's what I'm going to do on this show. I'm going to talk about that particular model. You got to realize that Bachman designers probably, this comes from Federo Dining Company. They were out of Bloomfield, New Jersey, actually where I grew up. And so their diners were all over the East Coast. And there were several dining companies along the East Coast. Bachman was in Philadelphia. And so Bachman's designers probably passed a diner like that. Whoever designed this probably passed that diner every dang day. And that's where he got the idea from. Anyway, that's it. I won't talk anymore. Jim, it's back to you unless anybody else has any questions.
Well, Dennis, what is happening here is exactly what I hoped would happen. And that is, I hope everybody is starting to understand. Dennis may run 3-rail track and run Lionel or Mike's Train House equipment, but the rest of his layout is as nice as any 2-rail scale layout you'll find anywhere in the world. And modeling is modeling. And what you're hearing is somebody like Jeff Jordan, who builds scratch build kits. We've had him on the show building scratch build kits, and he does a fantastic job. But he also understands the value of taking a commercial plastic kit and doing some modification and some detailing on it and have it be a first-class model on your model railroad. Whether you're a 2-rail or a 3-rail modeler, it makes no difference. It's all modeling. And that's what I hope that these segments, both on 2-rail O scale and O high rail, are going to demonstrate to everybody that watches the show. So Dennis, thank you so very much for tonight.
Hey, you're welcome, Jim. And thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll put my email address in the chat if anybody has any questions or suggestions or just wants to chew the fat with me. I'm available.
And wait till Dennis has Al on the show, and Al shows you one of his aluminum turntables or one of his other products. You'll just be amazed, absolutely amazed at the quality and the operation of it. So thanks again, Dennis. You have a good day.
All right, you too. Happy New Year, everybody.
Same to you, Dennis. Well, now I want to turn to Martin Breckbiel, MMR, for his Scratch Builders Corner. So Martin, welcome back.
Thanks, Jim. Hopefully anybody will remember what we were doing last week and will be able to remind me where I was. It's been a long week already. Okay. This looks plausible. possible too. Come on. Well, there we are. Well, there's what we were doing last week. We got the walls assembled. I remember doing this. Okay, so we're going to do some roofing and ceilings and other stuff. The infamous other stuff. Ah, gosh, it's so liberating. So we put a roof on over the office, which was 3-inch stock strip wood. I don't remember. I think it was 3x7s. Only because, totally arbitrary, only because I had a bundle of 3x7s and I don't have a really good idea what to do with odd numbered size of boards. Of course, 3 days after I run out of them, I'm sure I'll need a 3x7, but I won't have. Got the foundation completed around the entrance with the entrance step. And someday I'm going to have to go back and put a whole nother course of foundation in because I can blame that on Pat. We'll get to that in sometime later this month, perhaps. And a view from the other side. You see I've got all kinds of framing up at around the perimeter at the top. That's just to lock in the roof that we're going to make and put on top of this. Okay, we're going to make the main roof out of some plain, boring 1/32 flat sheet basswood. I buy this in huge bundles, huge being, I don't know how many, 24 or 30 or whatever the number is that Midwest sells them in from various hobby suppliers. If you look on eBay, you can find bundles of the stuff at actually pretty good prices versus buying individual sheets at your hobby shop. And a lot of these people ship it for free. So every now and then when I need 50 or, I need 5 pieces, I'll buy 50 because I'll use it eventually. And it's amazing how much disappears out of my shop. I'm just running out of stuff now. So we're going to take the flat sheet and glue that up to be big enough for the roof. Some 3x16 square stock underneath it for blocking. It's going to hold it in position so it can be a removable roof. And we'll add the rafter tails, and that'll lock the roof into place, but still leave it be removable. I'm just putting on a removable roof. I have no intentions of actually finishing the interior of this particular structure. This is just a teaching moment, I guess. So that's what this roof looks like from the inside, or upside down, or when it's not on the building. And you can see you have the rafter tails, front and back, or back and front. I don't remember which. Well, that's got an F, so that must be the front. And these are just on the inside of the 3/16 plus the clapboard on all 4 corners, 4 sides. And so that keeps it in place. It actually holds it down in place. And of course, some of these actually will also keep the 1/32 stock from warping. So this actually makes a decent roof that you can remove later. Okay, so we had 4 doors. I threatened we were going to make hinges. We're going to make hinges after all. I'll follow through on my threat. 3/16 ID brass tubing. And I've forgotten who makes this. It used to be K&S or Structural Shapes or one of the other brass shapes companies. It's hard to find 3/16 ID brass tubing, but there are people on eBay who sell you multiple packs of it at a ridiculously good price, sometimes with free shipping again. So I use a lot of this stuff because that 3/16 ID, sorry, it's 3/64. The ID is also the same size as a 33 thousandths brass wire, or it's actually 32.5. And we're going to use some 15 by 60 thousandths brass flat stock, just to make up some hinges. So we just clamp this all up. I got a piece of tubing clamped up, piece of flat stock, and a hemostat with some holding it together with a little bit of flux on there. 1 pass of the torch with some solder. Take the hemostat off. We now have a piece of flat stock soldered to a piece of tubing. Okay, The fun part is, of course, liberating this from the rest of the tubing. One Dremel cutoff wheel, nice and slow and easy, a little bit of filing. Maybe you want to clean this out just to make sure there's no solder in it. And now you have a strap hinge ready to use. And that's what your final product is. Fairly easy to do. It just takes a little bit of steady hands getting that hemostat on the tubing and a piece of flat stock, but a little bit of patience, it can be done pretty quickly. And you can see it's open. And I actually am not going to use 32 or 33 thousandths wire. I use 28, just so it makes it a little easier. So we only need 8 of them. So that's a few minutes in the shop or however long it takes. And you have to make sure you do clean up the back end of this a little bit so it's clean and it will turn cleanly. These get glued to the doors. Well, I guess we're going to come back and do that later. And then they get modified and we'll hang the doors probably next week. And this is, of course, I can't read it because it's on, I've got an extra banner at the top of the page, but that's okay. This is the boring wall. This is the end where the heating plant goes. You have to have a boring wall so you can put stuff on that makes sense on the inside, like a chimney. You put a window in the middle of this, you can't put a chimney there. And we're going to stop right there. That's all we're going to do this week. It's a new year. It's about as much momentum as I can get up. We'll catch up with you next week, and we'll show you how to hang those doors, which is also an adventure. Something I learned a long, long, long time ago when my family used to take down barns and reclaim all the lumber and all the ironwork and all the hardware. And I learned a lot about how these hinges actually work and how to make these things. It's a little blacksmith time. And any questions? Now's the time to yell.
Anybody have any questions for Martin? I like your hairdo tonight, Martin. It's very, very upscale.
Very good.
Okay.
That's what an app will do for you.
Thanks, Martin. Well, now I want to introduce Tom Farrell for his scratch building of his layout. Welcome, Tom. Hope you had a great New Year.
I did. Thank you for having me, and it's great to see everybody at the start of the new year here. And I've got something different. I don't have a structure this evening. I have some actual work on my layout. So let me get that going here. There we go. Okay. So this evening, I'm going to show you how I put together this tunnel, this mountain behind it, and the scenery and the billboard, basically, and this little bit of detail here, which you can't really see, but you'll see later in the show. This is something I've had for years. It's not resin, it's like some sort of foam of some sort. And I've been wanting to use it at some point. I usually build them myself. The fellow whoever built this built it out of 1/4-inch stock, which is very common, 1 foot in O scale. There's a big leap here how I colored it. Basically, I sprayed it a chocolate brown, and then I went back with acrylics, white, black, and brown, and just painted it. I had a missing component here. Fortunately, this guy did use 1/4-inch material, so I made my own here. And these straps are easy to make as well. All they are is styrene, like 010. And then these are Grant line bolt heads. I just cut them off, and with either super glue or styrene glue, I used a combination of both. I glued them onto the styrene. And when this is all painted, you'll see it's indistinguishable from the cast. These ones are cast on there. These ones I put on there. On the inside of the tunnel, it wasn't I wanted a tunnel liner, because if you're on the outside of this tunnel looking in, you can see this wall, and I didn't want the viewer to see this scenic backdrop. I wanted them to see an actual tunnel liner. So I had to do a little kit bashing here, if you will, a little retrofit. So I wasn't high enough. So I built it up by 3 quarter-inch sticks, and then I finished off the end. Next up, this is on the edge of the layout, and I needed to extend the fascia board upward. So I marked 2 holes here where I'm going to put dowel rods and add a board here. So those are my 2 marks. They're just dead center of this MDF here. This is the full scale O-scale track. I use this old fashioned drill because all my drills are out in my shed and it was too cold for me to go out there and get them. So I had this in the house. It worked fine. I drilled these 2 holes, and this thing's probably 100 years old. Got it from my grandfather. Then I put some glue on the end here, and then I put this board. It's not MDF, it's just pine board. There's 2 dowel rods in there. So when this all dried, it was just quite stout. So this is the right-hand side of the tunnel. This is the actual tunnel again, flipped. I put tacky glue on here, real thick Elmer's glue, if you will. And then I placed it onto the layout, and I just took two solvent cans for weights, put it on top of this to fasten this down onto the layout itself. This is my first full-scale O-scale freight car. I got this off of eBay. Pat, actually, one of our members, gave me a little guidance on this about a month and a half ago. Look at the difference between a narrow gauge car, ON30, and a full standard gauge. There's a significant difference. This is looking down into the tunnel. I put a black piece of plywood here, painted it flat black. So when you look in here, you won't see any detail. You won't see the back wall. And I also put a ceiling on here of plywood, painted it black. Now this area here is to the left of the tunnel, and I thought it would be a great place to put just some sort of scenic interest. So I came across a HO scale metal scrap load that goes in a gondola, and I marked it to notch it out so as you'll see, it'll fit against that retaining wall. Here's the idea. It just fits right in there. See my notching? The trick is when you use something like this is you don't want let me go back. You don't want a straight line here. You'll see how I mask. It's indistinct. You'll see that you won't see a line here when I'm all done. And I wanted this notch so that the junk, the scrap, would go right up against the wall. So my entire layout's made out of the surface is 2-inch foam. I just dug this out with an X-Acto knife, couple different blades, just then vacuumed it away. Then I lowered that HO gondola load into the layout, and I got it more or less flush with the pink foam. Now here's the trick here. I took this tacky glue and I purposely went into the load so that when I add cinders, it completely masks the fact that there's a parallel line here. It just disappears. And I added some details like some wood and a grate, pipe, but you can't tell that this is a gondola load anymore. And you can see these straps now. I've weathered them with pan pastels, and I'm showing a little rust running down here. The rails are rusted, and the ballast, I went back and added a alcohol wash there as well. Now for the ceiling or the mountain above the tunnel, I took a piece of 2-inch foam. Not a real great photo, but that's that foam right there. I put a smaller piece right here, and then I had this brainstorm to put a billboard here, my previous rustic buff and old Gothic railroad. So I just had this in the back of my mind. I took some scrap pieces of 2-inch foam. They're not glued, they're just laid in there to the rough contour of the, it's going to be a mountain, but it's only about 6 inches high here. And I started with a gauze material that I ordered off of Amazon. I got a whole box of it now. I cut it into about, well, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 6-inch long pieces that are roughly 4 inches wide. I cut a whole bunch of them off of this roll. Then I put them in the water. I'm sure you've all did this before. And then I just sloppily put them on that those foam pieces. These aren't glued. I didn't see any reason to do that. I put down 2 layers. And then because I'm on this, got to get this done in a week's time, I put a hair dryer on here and went back and forth for about 20 minutes till it basically hardened. And one nice thing about my new backdrop, my old rustic buff and old Gothic railroad had a photo for a backdrop, but it was photo paper. So if you got plaster on it, you basically ruined it. This is a vinyl material that I just wiped all the mess right off of it. There was no harm to it. I'm like, there's a little, all this just all came right off, as you'll see. Then I mixed up some Sculptamold. I always go with the cloth, the plaster impregnated cloth, and then Sculptamold. Then I Sculptamolded the whole top. This makes it rock hard, and this normally takes a couple days to dry. This wiped completely off. Would have been, I'd have to be really careful with the old backdrop. This one, it just didn't matter. There, I painted it with a Woodland Scenics earth color. Wiped this off. See, the plaster came right off. I went back and had to recolor this. You see, I got a little white on there. Then while the paint was still wet, I put down various terrain materials, including random greens, browns, little bushes and things. This is going to be covered with trees, but I like a nice base to it. So this is basically the base, if you will. And then I started putting in my billboard here. And then I started adding the trees. These are these deciduous trees I made from just a flocking material and a material called super trees. You buy it in a big bag, and they're brown, and I typically spray them, and then I spray them with adhesive, and then sprinkle materials on there to make these trees. These are store-bought, or show-bought, I should say. And it's quite effective, all in place. There's the scrap down there. This is unfinished right now, but there's my billboard. There's the trees, and there's the full-size car. There's another flat car. It's a pretty nice, effective scene. This is the interchange from the shanty town that switches from narrow gauge to standard gauge. This goes east to Harrisburg, let's say. My layout is narrow gauge is fictitious, but it simulates themed southern Indiana and Pittsburgh. So there's a loose connection to a standard gauge line. Anyway, that's all I got for you today. Yep.
Anybody
questions?
have any questions for Tom? Well, it's beautiful modeling, Tom. It really is.
Thank you. It's coming along. Another couple of weeks and I'll have this section of the layout done, and I'll move to another new section. Yeah. It's been 6, almost 7 months doing this part of the layout. I know it's not a race, but it does take time.
Well, and he's going to be taking a slight break because next week Tom starts building a Frenchman River couple of models for their build along. And I think you're really going to enjoy this because it's something a little different for the show. And again, the owners of Frenchman River are super nice people. Their products are great, I think. And I think you're really going to enjoy the build along that Tom's going to start next week. So Tom, thanks so much for doing all of this for the show.
Yeah, as a quick reminder, there's a discount offered by Frenchman River Model Works for this either O scale or HO scale. It's called a 34-foot lobster boat kit with a waterline hull. If you want to do the build along, I urge you to take the discount because we'll be starting that next Wednesday. And I've started the kit. It's incredibly detailed. Resin kits are far more detailed than styrene kits, and they're easier to put together. The art's in the painting of them.
And there's another part of the build along, and that's the shed that goes on the land side of it. So really between the ship and the shed, you've got an industry that you're creating for your model railroad. And I think that's kind of special because it's something different.
Yep. Thank you again for having me, and wish everybody a happy new year. And that's all, folks.
I'm glad you're well. I'm glad you're well and happy, and look forward to a great year with you, Tom. Thanks so much for your help.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, now I want to turn to Bob Geldmacher, who's going to talk to us today about 3D printing. Bob, welcome. How are you tonight, sir?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you.
Okay, good. So let me go share my screen. And I hope everybody can see my welcome to Whiskey River and Carroll Creek.
Can see that?
You see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We're going to talk about 3D printing tonight. And my goal is not to teach you how to do 3D printing. It's basically to whet your interest. And I'd like to divide the presentation into two parts. Tonight's part is to talk about some of the equipment that you need for 3D printing and some of the things you can do. And then in a next session, which hopefully will be next week, we'll talk about some more practical applications of 3D printing and what you can do to further the hobby. Okay, now it's not going to work. Okay. For me, 3D printing at first was more of a curiosity. I had seen a lot of information about it, and I was just kind of curious what it would do for me and the hobby. But as it turns out, and I think a lot of us are in the same position, that it seems like that we never have exactly the right part when we need that part. And a good example of that are like washers and spacers and bushings and clamps and special applications. I've had any number of cases where I needed to raise something or lower something. And I found that with a little bit of ingenuity, all these things can be made and not be purchased. Most of the time when I go to a hardware store, I can't find exactly what I'm looking for anyway. The other thing, and this is more the practical side, is that we can make our own rolling stock. And these are just 3 of the gondolas. These are about 12-foot ON30 gondolas. I have some 2-axle and some 4-axle. but we're expanding that line. We're not necessarily in the business of trying to sell this, but just to make have a really good piece of rolling stock. So when did this all start? And I'm not going to go down to every one of these. Let me click through them really quickly. But back in 1980, that's when people started thinking about 3D printing, and they wrote a paper on this topic called stereolithography. At that point, nothing was patented, but it basically laid the foundation for the 3D printing environment as we know it right now. And through the years, people got on the bandwagon and they did more research and actually built some machines. And finally, and we're going to talk about what FDM means in a minute, but the patent for some of the printers actually expired in 2009. And what that did was that it allowed anybody to get into the market, and it really expanded tremendously. For me, a crucial issue is that last point there was Prusa Research. I have Prusa 3D printers, and I love them because they really last long, and they do a great job. So this is just kind of a time map of how things went and how the industry got started. So what makes a 3D printer a 3D printer? First of all, it has to be able to make a 3D object, and that's pretty obvious. But secondly, it does make that object by laying down layers. So everything that we see, whether it's this type of printer or another we're going to talk about in a minute, very, very, very thin layers of material is laid down. And when I talk about thin layers, it could be anywhere from 0.2 millimeters all the way down to 25 microns, which is, 25 thousandths of a millimeter. Very, very, very thin layers. And lastly, it has to be an additive build process. One could talk about 3D printing in terms of like a CNC machine, but CNC machines are primarily a subtractive process where they have a piece of material and you're taking either metal away from it or you're taking wood away from it. In 3D printing, you start with virtually nothing and you actually build up the model. There are a lot of different 3D printers that are out on the market. There are a lot of different 3D printers that are available in industry. But from our standpoint as modelers, the two main types of 3D printers that we would be going after would be FDM, which is called Fused Disposition Modeling, and the other one is SLA, stereolithography. And I'm going to talk about both of those in just a minute. The FDM printers, they start, and the best way to describe it to people that have no knowledge of 3D printing, it's sort of like running hot glue through a hot nozzle. Because what we're doing is we're using a very, very fine plastic filament, and we're running it through the hot nozzle. And that hot nozzle actually melts the filament and then lays it down in a Cartesian coordinate system based on the software that we use to design the thing. It builds layers from the bottom up, and I'm going to show you another picture of the Prusa. This is one of the Prusas. This is one of my older Prusas. But it builds on a build layer and a build plate, and that's what this area here is. That's the build plate. Most of the time, you can buy them fully assembled, or you can also buy them in kits. As it turns out, all the Prusas that I own, I bought them as kits. The nice thing about building something from a kit is you know how it came about, and then when you have to fix it, if you have to fix it, you have a much better understanding of what component you have to go after in order to get something fixed. A lot of the FDM printers you can buy for well under $400. As it turns out, the Prusas are kind of high end. They go for about $800. But from my standpoint, the investment is well worth it. And it's very easy to get started using the filament printer. And for me, if I were to recommend to anybody that wants to get into 3D printing, that maybe the filament printer is the best way to go. Here are some of the components associated with the printer. I mentioned before the build plate, and this is where everything is built up front. There's a filament that comes down through this hot end here, and there are several fans on it, but basically the temperature of the nozzle here gets up into the hundreds of degrees, melts the filament, and then it actually lays it down in a pattern that's dictated by the software that you use. Other things is the main control board is sitting back here. You can't see that too well. It's got a power supply, and then it's got an X-axis, a Y-axis, and a Z-axis. That's the reason why I said it works on the Cartesian coordinate system. And then all the controls for the Prusa are actually, and for many of the 3D printers, are actually a little either touchpad. This particular one is not a touchpad, but it's a touch screen that you can actually control how that machine is working. The filament that we put through the FDM printers, a wide variety, and not only the types, but also the colors. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see that there's a wide variety of colors. The three that I use primarily, and I think most people use, are number one, PLA. PLA is I think it's polylactic acid that's made up. We use that. We also use PETG. I can't remember what the PETG stands for. And then ABS. ABS is something that I have never used, and it requires more of a controlled environment. So the PLA and the PETG are my go-to filaments. And this is a picture of how this machine works. So it's actually laying down that layer of plastic coming through that, and it's going back and forth, and it'll build up something that could be as high as about 200 millimeters high. Now, at this point, I usually run into a problem because this doesn't want to stop. So bear with me here. Let's see if we can get it out of there. Nope, not today. There we go. Okay. Along with the basic machines, you can have add-ons. I mentioned a Raspberry Pi and Octoprint. These are two add-ons. The Raspberry Pi is a small computer, and it allows me, or allows anyone that has these, to actually talk directly to the machine. The baseline machine for many of these, you actually have to create an SD card or a thumb drive, and you take and you plug it into the machine. That's how you get the file over to it. Using the Raspberry Pi and the Octoprint, that's all on my home network, and I can just communicate directly to my printers without actually having to go to them. You can also add cameras. This is an older camera, and what that allows you to do is it allows you to monitor the progress of your print from anywhere in your house. And I do that many times. I'll be upstairs watching TV. I might have a 4 or 5 hour print going on. The nice thing is, number one, I know when the print's done, but secondly, if the print should crash and you get a ball of spaghetti, and I know a couple of the guys have 3D printers and they probably know what I'm talking about. It's nice to be able to stop that as soon as you can. Otherwise, you have a very large ball of spaghetti if you let it go to completion. These are my two newest Prussias. These are MK4s. Here's a dongle that I put on there so that I still am taking the thumb drive or the SD card and plugging it into these. I haven't hooked these up to my local area network yet, although these MK4s actually come with built-in Wi-Fi capability. And it takes probably around 15 hours to build them, but it's very rewarding when you crank them up for the first time and they work. There's a number of different 3D printers sitting out on the market. Here's just a couple of them that you can see. This kind of is an oddball. It's an Anycubic Delta. Most of the other ones you can see have this squared off look, but I had an Anycubic Delta to begin with. I built it, could never get it to print, packed it up, sent it back to Amazon. They gave me full refund, and that's when I decided to make the jump to the Prussias. Okay, moving on to the other type, and that's the SLA printers. The SLA printers are an entirely different animal. Instead of working with that filament that melts, they work with a liquid that's ultraviolet sensitive, and it's an ultraviolet sensitive polymer, and that's the build material. So you're building from a liquid to a solid. The UV source sits down in the bottom of this chamber here. And again, when you use the software to design these, each layer is created in a mask, and that mask either lets the light go through or doesn't. And when the light does go through and contacts the UV or the UV sensitive material, a very thin layer, and a thin layer I'm talking about maybe 25 thousandths of a millimeter, is exposed. And then the build plate or the build plate lifts up, more fluid comes in, the next layer is exposed, and you keep building those layers up. Most of the time, these come fully assembled. So I've only known one that has a kit form. And again, there are many manufacturers out there to build these. This is a Elegoo Saturn. That's what I'm using. There are fewer parts on the Elegoo and fewer parts on the SLA printers than there are on any of the FDM printers. But the downside is this vat, and that's where that UV liquid sits, is very, very sensitive, and you have to be real, real careful that you don't rupture that vat, because if you do, then you have this fairly caustic liquid flowing down over everything, and you can basically destroy the printer if you're not careful. The nice thing about the SLA printers is you can get extremely good detail. Now, these are not model railroad related. I pull these off the web, but many of the folks that are into creating miniatures and wargaming, they love the SLA printers because you can get the kind of detail that you see here. Something that I did make, I wanted some lanterns for my ON30 layout. And at first, before I got my SLA printers, I was using the FDM printers, the Prussias. And, you know, because these are so small, you don't see all of these irregularities. But when you start making them with the SLA printers, all of a sudden, all those irregularities go away, and you can get some extremely fine detail. Here are my two working SLA printers. This is a Elegoo Saturn 2. This is a newer Elegoo Saturn 3 Ultra, and it has probably twice the speed and twice the resolution as the one that's the red cover. The covers are primarily to protect you against the UV rays that are coming out of the bases here. And this yellow is by another manufacturer. It's called Anycubic, and this is a wash and cure machine. I'll talk about it in a little bit, but after you're finished with an SLA print, it still has some of the liquid resin on the outside, so you have to be able to clean it, and you also have to be able to cure the final product, and that's what that machine will do for you. And again, there are many SLA printers out on the market. You can see a few of them here. Okay, so just a comparison between the two is that both the FDM and the SLAs are readily available. The cost of entry is relatively low, and that's kind of important to model railroaders because you don't want to lay out thousands and thousands of dollars to get into this technology. You can usually do it under $500. There's a tremendous amount of YouTube content out there about people that are willing to train you and show you different techniques about how to do things. And almost every month there's a new player coming into the market. From the FDM standpoint, they're relatively easy to learn. So the learning curve is not that steep. But the build volume is relatively slow. If it takes 5 minutes to build one piece, and if you have 10 pieces, it's going to take 10 times that, or 50 minutes. And many prints could go for hours. And I've had prints go for as long as 12 hours. I've heard some prints go as long as 24 hours. They have a relatively large build volume. I know on my Prussias, we're talking about roughly 200 by 200 by 200 millimeters, which for most of the things that I build, is enough. The material is easy to handle. Once you're finished building something, you can pick it up and you can place it in place right away. The post-processing is easy, except for maybe a little bit of sanding here and there. There's not a whole lot that you have to do. And we talk about supports. Supports are additional pieces of plastic that are added in order to hold things together so that you're not printing in just space. And you need not that many supports with the FDMs. Now, on the other hand, with the SLAs, the learning curve is a lot steeper. It's taken me probably a couple of years to get to the point where I feel comfortable with it right now. But the build is much faster. Where I said before that on the FDM, if you have one piece that takes 5 minutes and you make 10 pieces, it's going to take 10 times as long. As it turns out with the SLA printer, if I make one piece or I make 100 pieces on the same build plate, it takes the exact same amount of time. And that's the beauty of the SLA over the FDM. You can cut the build time down by hours sometimes in making different pieces. They usually do have a bit smaller build volume, but I haven't found that to be a big problem. But again, they can get much higher detail than you can with the FDMs. The material does need special handling. I've seen videos where people want to wear masks and goggles and gloves. And I can tell you from experience, because, and I talk about post-processing here, I post-process and clean all of my materials with 91% IPA and isopropyl alcohol. And there's been a number of times where my hands actually didn't blister as if there was a sunburn, but they actually blistered, and I had to go to a dermatologist So I wear gloves all the time. And that's one of the big things that I would say to anybody that's thinking about getting into the SLA world is be really careful with material because it can damage your hands. Now I threw this in there because it's I found it very interesting. There's a company out there called Junko, and I often wonder whether anybody would buy a machine with a name like Junko. It might be a fine machine, but the name would kind of lead me away not to buy it. So here we have a Junko machine, and it's going for about $349. Okay, so the question is, how do we get from here, which is either the resin that you see with the SLAs or the filament that you see with the FDMs over to a final product? And the answer is all through software. It's a three-step process. It's number one, you have to design it. Number two, you have to slice it. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then you print it. Okay, the design part is basically you build things in a two-dimensional world. This is a very simple drawing here. And then once you have that two-dimensional world, you can do something called extruding, which says, okay, I'm going to take that surface and I'm going to pull it out. I can pull it out. I can push it in any way you want to. But you come up with a three-dimensional object. And that object is then outputted into a file that's called an STL. So a lot of 3D printers will talk about trying to get other people's STLs because that's where the design is. And then once you get that STL, then you're going to send it to another piece of software, which is called a slicer. And the slicer is going to be dividing that piece of that you just created into very, very thin layers and storing those layers and passing those over to the printer. There's a lot of things that you can do with this software. For instance, if I wanted to make a lamp shade like this, you can start out with a two-dimensional type of drawing like this, and then you can tell the software I want to revolve that around a given axis, and all of a sudden you've got a three-dimensional lampshade, and you can do this over and over and over. The biggest thing, and when people talk about the learning curve, is that if you can imagine things in primitives, and by primitives I mean squares and circles and rectangles, then you can build using those, and then you can blow it out to make anything that you want to make. There's a lot of software out there. The one that I use is Autodesk Inventor. It's a fairly high-end software. Here's some other ones. Tinkercad, I think somebody mentioned that last week. Even though these are very expensive, Autodesk, who is the owner of Inventor, if you can show that you're a student, then you can actually use their software for no charge at all. And for me, it's a matter of going and taking a course every once in a while at my local community college, get my student status, and then I get a $1,600 package that I can use every year. And it's absolutely legal, and it's a great package. And some of the other ones are like that too. Now, the slicer that I mentioned before, once you have the design done, it's going to take and bring in the STL file that you made from the CAD file, and it's going to divide that design into very, very, very thin layers. And once you have it in there, you can do other things. You can scale it. For instance, you could take a figure and go from O scale to G scale. One of the things that I'm doing right now is there's a company in England called Model U, and you can actually purchase STL files of railroad figures from them. So if I can take that railroad figure and it comes in HO scale and also comes in 1/43.5 scale, I can scale that so I can get it to 148 without any trouble at all. And I don't lose any detail. You can position the piece, you can rotate it, you can make multiple copies. You can actually have different segments. So if you want to divide this thing up and print different segments at the time, you can mirror it. Something else that I'm doing with my figures is that if I have a human figure with, let's say, the right arm up, I can take that, copy it, and mirror it. So then all of a sudden it looks like the left arm is up. So instead of having one figure, I can have two figures. And then you can cut and chop. You can cut pieces off anytime you want to. Now, once that's all done, then that program outputs something called a G code. And the G code is actually the machine language that the printers understand. Here's just this is my Prusa slicer. This is where I do a lot of my slicing for my FDM printers. And so it gives me a lot of flexibility. Here's some of the features. For instance, I can split it up into different parts. I can make copies using this function up here, and I can dictate what PL or what filament that I'm using, how much infill. If I have 100% infill, that means, of course, that I've got a solid piece. But if you don't need that kind of strength, you can save a lot of filament by reducing that infill. And then you can do things like rotating it and scaling it down here. This is a plate of the figures that I was showing you. These are the model U figures. This set came as 5 different figures. So what I did was I copied, and then it came in as 43.5. I scaled them down to 48. And then I copied and made 30 figures. Half of these are reversed. So I can put many, many figures like that on the layout for not too much of a cost. And again, on this one, the resolution is very, very fine. So it's down in the thousandths of millimeter level. Different slicers that are available. The Prusa slicer is one of my favorites. I also use this called Lychee or Litchi slicer. This is the one that I use primarily for my SLA printers. And here's some of the other ones that are out there, just to name a few. Now, if you don't want to go to all the trouble to design your own, there are repository of files sitting out on the internet. One is called Thingiverse. It's absolutely free. There are people that have made things like me and say, I'm going to share that with the world. They put it out on Thingiverse, and then you can download those files and you can use them any way that you want. And some of the other houses that have pieces that you can download, here's that module U that I mentioned. Prusa themselves have something, Prusa Printables, and other companies that can actually allow you to download those STL files so that you can play with them. And if you don't want to print your own, there are companies out there that'll do the printing for you. So you can design and then send that design to them. Shapeways is a very, very popular one, and some of the other ones. Now, these do cost money to use, but they turn out very, very good products. If you want to learn about 3D printers, almost all of them have embedded tutorials. There's a tremendous amount of information out on the web and YouTube sessions. There are paid through courses. One of the ones that I've used is this company called Udemy. And Udemy allows you, they have courses almost any topic that you can imagine. But the cost is relatively cheap. It might be $20, and then you have a lifetime access to the course. Local libraries, great place to go. I know the local library that we have here in Westminster, Maryland, actually has some of the Prusa 3D printers. And again, all you have to do is take your design to them and take your filament, and then you can actually print at no cost at all. And of course, there's a number of members. I know that Earl does it. I think Phil does it. And there might be some other guys that also have 3D printers. And, you know, I think we all love to talk about that. That's where I'm going to stop for tonight. I just wanted to give you a flavor for what the technology is about. Next time, I'd like to talk about some practical applications. And these are just a couple of the things that I've been able to do. For instance, I will never have to buy another window from anybody. So we can make our own windows, and we can make them in any size and any configuration that we want to. Here are some of the dwarf signals that I've been able to produce. This is that lampshade that I showed you that we made, and we can hang on a building. And in one of my most recent projects are these water tenders that go behind my ON30 Climax. And we have sold a number of these. People find them very popular. We started off, and I'm going to blame it all on Steve Sherrill, because Steve actually needed something to pull behind some of his ON30 engines where he could put his batteries and little radio receivers in so he could run his dead rail. So I looked at some of the things he had on his layout, and then we designed these and printed these. And there's both a rounded version. This is a rounded corner version, and this is a square version. So everything on these have been printed except for the wheels themselves. So that's where I'm going to stop. I'll answer any questions that anybody might have. And I really encourage anybody that's interested to look into 3D printing, because it's a tremendous way to forward the hobby. And Jim mentioned earlier about trying to get young people in. This is certainly an avenue that might interest a lot of young people. A new technology that we can provide and actually use on an old hobby. So, anybody have any questions?
I got a question, Bob.
Sure.
Tom Farrell.
Yeah.
If you
Where are you?
design,
Yeah, I got you.
you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, I got you.
If you do a 3D drawing in like SketchUp or one of those CAD programs, you can't just download that STL file, a direct connection into your filament printer. You have to use a slicer.
You have to slice it, Tom.
So you got to buy it. That's another program.
Yeah, you have to. And for instance, Prusa Slicer is free. There's no charge for that at all. But you do have to take it and you have to have the software divide the object into those layers. And then that layer, the G code, is sent actually over to the printer.
Okay. So there's okay.
And listen, I know Bob covered an awful lot of material tonight. And again, you heard me talk earlier in the show about the new Facebook group that we've established. That's why we've established it. Because if you go back, Earl will be breaking our shows up, and one of the segments that will be broken up is Bob's segment. And if you go back and you listen to it again, and a question comes to your mind, go to the group and ask the question. Bob can be on the group, he can answer the question there, and it's like a continuation of our show. So that's what the group is for, and for things like the detail and the technical parts of what Bob just went over, that's perfect for what we envision the group Facebook page to be for. Because a lot of people may not have questions that come immediately to mind, but if they look at the video later, something will dawn on them and they'll say, gee, I wish I'd have asked that. Well, go ahead and ask it. Just go to the group and ask the question.
Mm-hmm.
Bob, I really do appreciate it and look forward to part 2 next week.
Okay, yeah, I think next week, Jim, you have me on for scenery.
Yeah, I changed that after you said part 2 was next week, so now you're on for part 2 next week.
Okay, it's great because I'd like to hold off on scenery after I come back from Springfield, and if there's any new things that we have, then we can actually show them then.
Okay, so do me a favor, send me an email and tell me when you want to start scenery.
Okay, fine, we'll do.
Well,
Tom, did you have another question?
Yeah, one quick question. So if you do a 3D drawing STL file and you want to send it to Shapeways, you can just send the file to them and they take care of the.
I don't know. I've never done that with Shapeways. I know that they're going to have the capability to slice it.
No, that's how I've worked with Shapeways quite a bit. This is Earl, and yeah, they'll just send the STL file, they print it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good to know, Earl.
Yeah, there's STL in 2 different formats that you can send into Shapeways.
Okay.
That they do the slicer convert
when
you send it into them. But if you're in the United States, there are 3 or 4 smaller companies in the United States that you can send stuff off to be 3D printed that are a lot more cost.
I was just curious whether you had to play the game and do the secondary programming. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, and Happy New Year, everybody.
Same to you, and look forward to seeing you next week for this part 2 of this. This is interesting, I think. I've never heard of the slicer before. So anyway, let's turn now to Steve Sherrill, who's back from his holiday vacation, to say, what do you want to talk about? So Steve, what do you want to talk about?
Well, it's kind of hard to follow up Bob, but I actually thought it was next week, but it's okay. I want to talk about a trip I took to a local hobby shop. Probably the best hobby shop in the East Coast for sure. I went up there with a friend, and I walked around and I looked at all the different scales he had there. And I was hit all of a sudden with the prices. And I was kind of taken aback at how much I could not afford. Now, I'm a long time in the hobby over 70 years. And all of a sudden, I couldn't afford what was at the hobby shop. And I was troubled as to how new people can afford to get into the hobby. And I've often wondered what other people think about this and how they budget their funds to buy new engines, new track, whatever they want to do in the modeling. And so I would kind of like to have a discussion of this because it kind of really shocked me. And I'm not a poor person. I have adequate funds. But it was just, I looked at how a person with a young family affords $300 or $400 for an engine. And track, of course, is, about $7 or $8 a foot if you measure it out. And just how they do it. I mean, you can scratch build, but even the supplies to scratch build cost you something. And I got home and I really got to thinking about this, that is what I would like to discuss tonight. And I'd like to get other people's feedback on this, what they think. I mean, I go to train shows and I see people carrying a lot of bags out and buying a lot of stuff, expensive stuff. And I'm just wondering, what are their budgets and how do they do it? I mean, a hobby really is supposed to be something that you do with your extra money to enjoy, the fruits of your labor. So that's what I'd like to open up for discussion tonight. So if anybody has any input about any thoughts on this, I would certainly appreciate it because I am really kind of confused as to how the hobby is going to survive with the prices that are being charged. And I like I say, I'm just very confused at this. So does anybody have any input on that?
Steve, this is Bob. That's one of the very reasons why I find, and I don't mind spending my money on 3D printing stuff, because I've seen the same thing you have, that the prices are just very, very high, and that if you want to have things in volume, and I'm going to go back to the issue with the small figures, is that to populate a layout with a number of figures gets very, very expensive. And I would rather put my money into something that I can use to make those figures as compared to going out and buying them. And that's across the board with a lot of things. There are certain things that I have to buy. For instance, I have to buy wheels. I have to buy couplers. But other than that, I would rather take the time. And that's the big trade-off, I think, is time versus money. That's the big trade-off.
Well, now, when I go to a train show, I'm able to negotiate prices with even the dealers there sometimes. But the average person who's reselling stuff, and I can get some really good buys. And so, unfortunately, that's how we get the demise of our hobby shops is, we're trying to get things actually as economically as we possibly can. I mean, gone are the times when you could allot $75 a month or $100 a month when you want to buy a switch or something like that. It's just impossible. I don't know how people do it. And if you're into larger scales like O scale, there are no cheap items. There is nothing cheap. And with everything else going up nowadays, it's really difficult, I think, to have the hobby going at the speed that you want it to go. So that's why it becomes a lifetime hobby, I guess.
Well, we've had a couple of hobby shops. Matter of fact, I think almost all the hobby shops here in Maryland are gone. Klein's, I just understand, just closed up their shop. We had a local hobby shop called the Moose Caboose, and Glenn went under because of the internet. People would come in and say, "Hey, I can get it cheaper on the internet. You can only do that so many times before you've lost all your customers. So the hobby shops that still exist, they can charge whatever they want because there's no competition anymore.
Yes.
And
But I mean,
I can't fault somebody from being in business and trying to make a profit. I mean, that's why they're there. But you're right; it's very, very expensive.
and even you figure an O scale is twice as big as an HO, but the prices were almost the same. The HO locomotives were the same as the O scale locomotives, and the N, when you get down to N scale, they're the same as the O scale prices. You know, as we've gone into more and more electronics, we have added that price into the cost of the product we're trying to get. And so the prices just zoom up.
Yeah.
Look, cars are like unbelievably priced now. You know, I mean, if you want to get a nice HO car, you're talking $50, $75 for a car. So, you know, it's very troubling for someone who can remember back when, you know, things were much cheaper. And so it's just very, very troubling to me.
Well, I'm going to play the antagonist here. I just went on eBay. There's 22,824 HO locomotives for sale on eBay. Some as low as $28, $29. So, I mean, there are, you don't have to spend $200-$300 for a DC, you know, digital command control locomotive from, you know, one of the top manufacturers right now. There are alternatives, and as you grow into the hobby, you can buy one of these, you know, crazy locomotives. But there's still opportunities on the used market. There's literally hundreds of locomotives here under $50.
Yes.
Hundreds, you know. So
you're absolutely correct, Tom. But what happens is the person will buy that cheap locomotive, and then they'll put DCC and sound in it, and right away they put another couple $100 in it.
I'm
you know
telling you, you can. There's always a way. If I do DC, there's 2,467 HO locomotives DC fitted, and pre-owned $149. I mean, it's not cheap, but $105, $65, $39. You know, it's $50. I mean, there's a way. You don't have to be an ex-CEO to. It's always been considered the king's hobby, but there's a way to get in on an entry level if you want to.
Yeah, a lot of people don't deal with YouTube though. They like to see product.
eBay. Yeah. Well, but I think the people that are just starting the hobby are the younger people, and they certainly know how to manage through. But there's literally hundreds and hundreds of locomotives here that are below $100. You know.
Well, guys, it seems to me that this is an easy thing for us to deal with. It's called mentoring. We know where we can get something for a reasonable price that's a startup, and we can help the modeler. The modeler guide him as to where to look for that car for $10 or that locomotive for $55. We can mentor these people and help them get started. The problem is there's nowhere for these people to go to get that knowledge, and we're not offering the knowledge voluntarily.
Well, I know
Steve, there's also, I think what you're also observing is that inflation has had a root and cause for some of the expense that we're facing. You and I and many of us sitting here, we can remember buying a loaf of bread for 30 cents or 40 cents at the grocery store. Now you go in and you find that a loaf of bread is $1 or better. So first of all, you have to admit that the cost of things have gone up over the course of time. And so even today, someone who has $1 million really doesn't have a lot of money. But when we were kids, $1 million, boy, you had it made for the rest of your life. So one of the things we're dealing with here is just the cost of everything in our world today. And secondly, you have to take a different mindset. a locomotive for $200 today really that's not an expensive thing. It is to us because we have a mindset that goes back further where a locomotive might be $30. And so things are a lot different today. So people have to earn more money. In a sense, they have to have better jobs in order to be able to buy the equipment they need. I just can't afford any kind of a laser printer or even a DNC machine. That's just way out of my range. So I'm trying to do my modeling with the least expensive items like paper and cardboard.
Yep.
And of course, I do spend a little. Usually it's on wood or plastic to be able to create things from scratch because I really can't afford the expensive laser cut kits. But even then, I can save a couple of pennies here, a couple of dollars there, and eventually be able to buy a laser kit. But we're facing basically a cost of living that has grown over a number of years. People today, they know they have to make a certain amount of money to be able to afford the kinds of things they want to get. So they have the jobs that enable them to do that. You and I look back and we say, well, it's really out of my price range. And we just live with that difference of a mindset. But today things are more expensive than they used to be.
Yes, well, of course, I agree with that. But what I think is when these people see these fantastic layouts that are being built by great modelers, and we have many on this site right here, they want to immediately go to that level. You know, they want to go to the DCC battery controlled and all that other kind of thing, JMRIs and all that, you know, the computer operated huge layouts, because that's what they're exposed to. You don't see many people who say, gee, I'm going to make a 4x6 layout, which is what we all started out with, 4x6, 4x8 probably. And we had a circular track, and that lasted us for a long time. Now they're automatically designing something for the third bedroom. You know, when I talk with people about battery, I try to talk them down to having small layouts, and with the advantage, because I have a big layout, and I tell you, it's more than I can handle. And you know, if I only get 2 or 3 people here to run it, you know, it's just way too big for me. And I just think that there are times when we overemphasize the Mercedes part of the hobby. Rather, again, the Chevrolet would get us there, but somebody wants the Mercedes all the time. And the manufacturers are coming out every single day with new products. Every single day, and I don't blame them. I just think that there's got to be some way that we can, and it's very confusing because I don't want to tell anybody, hey, don't have an 80-car train with, you know, stacks and that kind of thing, because that's what they want. But somewhere down the line, it's going to catch up with them, you know, and so.
Steve, something you might not be aware of, and that is in Canada here, we're paying 45% to 50% more than what you guys are. So to me, when you quote a locomotive being $200, hey, that's cheap. You know, that's a good deal for you guys. Far better than we can get it, because we got the what do you call it, the money exchange, and we have taxes that I don't think you have quite so much of. Anyway, so it works like 45 to 50% more expensive than it is in the States. So you guys count your blessings, man. You got a lot of good stuff going there.
Well, I mean, this may be a problem all over the world. I don't know, because I'm only exposed to what I'm exposed to. So I don't know, like, what happens in Canada very much. how much extra you pay. To me, it's just, you know, it's just very confusing for somebody who's older and who's maybe sees the value of a dollar more than the person who still has the ability to make money. You know, my income is finished. You know, I don't make any more money. I got a retirement. That's the only money I have. I can't get a raise except what everybody else in the country gets. So when I say my income has stopped, it's stopped.
Steve, I have an offer. In Chatham here in Canada, our club offers a auction sale once a year, and you would be amazed, and it's strictly for trains and anything related to trains, model trains.
Mm-hmm.
And we offer some fantastic deals, and if you know one around your area, you'd be amazed at how much money you can save at an auction, because a lot of people are trying to unload their stuff that want to get out of the hobby, and that's where you get it, a really good deal.
Jim, do you mind if I share screen a second?
Go ahead.
Guys, see this? So you know I'm not BSing you. There are hundreds. Some of these are brand new. Hundreds and hundreds of new locomotives for $50, $60. These are all DCC, every one of them. DCC. This one's pre-owned, $89. I mean, $70. I mean, DCC, pre-owned. Some of them are new, some of them are pre-owned. But you can, news, $94. I mean, just everything's under $100 here. I search for, you know, it's there if you want it.
Tom, I look at that list every day. I go through eBay, mainly for 0 and 30. But you have to also realize that to get the DCC units, that costs big bucks.
No, those are encoder equipped locomotives.
Not the locomotives, but to get in operation with the DC systems.
You don't have to get a Digitrax like mine will run a nuclear submarine. Everybody doesn't need one like that, you know. They can do a basic, and they don't necessarily even have to have DCC. You could do analog. I'm just saying there's a way. I'm not trying to shoot you down in flames. I'm saying there's always a way.
Right.
So I think let's take a step back and talk about mentoring, because I think this is a place that we can mentor young people. Because if you think about doing model railroading, there are some different components of building a layout of, you know, you start by building models. If you buy kits, we all know that the kits cost, you know, 70, 80% of the cost of a kit is the instructions. 60%. The materials are, you know, 20 to 40% of the cost. So if you do, you know, coming back to what Tom's been doing and Scratchbuilding, you cut a lot of that cost out. You know, if you look at cars and those kinds of things, you know, either you can build them yourself or you can buy them, you know, in different ways. You know, we have an auction out here in the Coast Division. We do it now 2 times a year. We had about 350 items at the last auction. I'll tell you my great disappointment. We had one member sell 8 locomotives, 8 HO locomotives, all with lock sound or Soundtrax decoders in them, all priced between $30 and $40. And one of them sold. 7 didn't sell. So, you know, the deals are there. I think the thing is to tell people, you know, money shouldn't be a barrier to participating in the hobby. You know, you look at DCC, you can buy a Sprague and run a Sprague for a, you know, relatively small money. You can go with, you know, Blunami and not even have a control system, or Locofy. I think that one of the things we need to do is talk about, maybe we need to talk about a bit about how do you become, you know, more economical in the hobby? Because I think the opportunity is there. If you go buy things at list price and you buy, like Tom said, the top end models, they're going to be expensive, and they've gone up because of inflation here, but also because of the supply chain issues in China. You know, it was interesting when I was, for those of you that are in HON3, the, you know, Soundtrax, what's the name of their HON3 models? Somebody knows. The HON Blackstone. So, I was at during the convention last year. I was the narrow gauge convention. Was actually at Soundtracks, and the guy there has made a very interesting comment. He said we sometimes had to send locomotives back to China 12 times to have them get it right to our standards, and now they're not willing to work with Soundtracks because, quite frankly, they probably found it wasn't economical. So I think, we need to expect the vendors to try to figure out what's the right options for us. So. I think that this is something, though, that becomes interesting. It might be interesting, Jim, to think about, maybe we should have a economical model railroading, take something that says, how do you do this cost effectively? What are the, 10 areas, 5 areas you have to build your models in? And, you look at structures. What are you doing in structures? You look at scenery. There's a lot of low cost ways of doing scenery. You look at engines, you look at cars, you look at a DCC system. I mean, each one of those, do you really need sound? I mean, you can buy a really nice HO decoder for $30 if you don't care about sound. In fact, if you send me an email, I'll send you 2 or 3 of them. So I think it's this idea of people have to think about this as being aspirational over time. So you start out, where most of us started out. You didn't go out and buy 40 locomotives for your layout. You built up to it. So I think there's a woe is me here that probably is not the right thought process. It's probably really, how do you do this and how do you decide where to spend your money and your time?
Phil, I couldn't agree more. And I'll come back to the first comment you made when you started talking. I think it's an opportunity to mentor. You look at the talent that we have on this show, seriously, and you just look around, look at the people that talk on this show. The amount of information that we can provide a new modeler coming in just on how to buy, how to get started, it is phenomenal. And I'll be honest with you, we're not doing it. And the reason we're not doing it is we're not being asked. And the reason we're not being asked is there's nothing set up that says, ask me a question, I'll give you an answer. Well, if anybody views this, if anybody knows young people that view this, one way that they can start asking for help that you can easily provide, each one of you can easily provide, is through our group that we just started. Just go on it and ask for help. That's all you got to do. It's the easiest thing in the world. Just give us a comment. What do you want to buy? We'll try to help you get it. Mm-hmm. And chances are somebody that I'm looking at right now on this screen has an answer. But they don't give it out because no one is asking it. Or if they are, they don't know they're asking it. It's a mismatch. It's why I started writing the articles and started this Zoom show originally, trying to connect the people that have questions with the people that have answers. And let both parties know that all you got to do is talk to each other, and both parties want to give the information and get the information, but there wasn't a channel to make it happen. That's why I do this. And here's a perfect example of how we can hopefully get young people involved in our hobby. It's not going to cost us anything, except we're just giving our knowledge to them about how to get started. It's called mentoring. Okay. Great conversation starter, Steve. Thank you so much. Next week, I'll look for you again.
I got to go by.
But tonight, I want to thank one modeler. Only one modeler this whole 2 hours has contributed to our scholarship. And that person is David Menard. So David, thank you so much for being a member of the community that has donated to the 2024 scholarship program. We really do appreciate it. And thank you. I can't say enough about how thankful I am that at least one person that heard me has contributed. I think that's fantastic. If I only reach one person a week, I'll settle for that. But I think it's ridiculous that only one modeler who heard me with my tirade earlier has contributed money to the scholarship. What on earth is happening here? I just don't seem to be able to communicate how important I think this program is and how serious we are in trying to hustle this program. I don't know another word. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to hustle this program. Anyway, David, thank you so very much, sir. Really do appreciate the generous donation that you made. Well, with that said, I'd like to go to our caboose for the evening. And we've got a tremendously beautiful caboose. And it reminds me of when I used to run my Lion Wheel trains. Guys, I've got to apologize. This is not the video that I thought we were going to be running for the caboose. We'll run the caboose that reminds me of my Lionel train next week. This caboose gives you an idea of how long it takes a train to stop if they have an accident at a grade crossing. And this was run in Florida. Phil says this is for Jim, and it's true. This train has seriously had major accidents in the state of Florida. And we wanted you to see how long it takes for a train to stop. I mean, it's not just something happens and you put a brakes on like the car and it stops in 20 feet. It doesn't work like that. So Phil, thanks so much for getting us this caboose this evening. I hope everybody enjoyed the show tonight. Most importantly, I hope you learned something. That's what it's all about. Thank you so much for being here. Hope you come back next week, and happy modeling until then. Till next week.